2030.
Saudi Arabia, the Public Investment Fund,
It's a
there's
big
a lot of excitement
It's
around
transformational
specifically.
change. Every aspect of the kingdom, economic, social, cultural, religious.
The 2030.
This is the 2030.
Yalla.
This is the 2030 episode 55. Well, Dr. Hanaa, 55 big, beautiful episodes of the 2030. How are you?
Hi, Lucien. I am doing well. 55 is a big number. That's a lot of episodes.
It's a lot of episodes. We're just getting started. We're going for 5,500. So strap in, just like the Green Initiative. We're 1% of the way there. This is good. How are you? Like, what's up? How is London? How's the weather? Give me an update.
I'm great. London is wonderful. It's a 24-degree day, which is a beautiful, beautiful 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And sunny, partially sunny. So it's great. It's spring has sprung. It's a good day. My kids are in half term, meaning I think you call it midterm break in the US. So we have a week off. And yesterday I came back from a couple of days in Hampshire in the New Forest, which was beautiful.
And the New Forest, it's like a new forest. They're like, hey, new trees. We're like, this is a brand new initiative, or like, what are we looking at here? Is that a misnomer?
I think
because the photos you sent or the photos you put on Instagram looked like a very old forest. So
yeah.
what's up with that?
So 1071, I think it's not very new. So William the Conqueror, who basically the founder of England,
Billy
called
C,
it he called it the New Forest because he designated it as a new hunting ground once he wrote his Magna Carta or whatever. I don't even, that was the wrong. Is that the right thing?
This is you'd think there'd be a sunset clause on the name New Forest, though. You know what I mean? Because that's not very new at all. Yeah. So, but they start with a name that's good. But it was an enjoyable day out in nature. That's great.
2 days in nature. Like some really beautiful trails, really, really close to civilization. So you're never really out in the middle of nowhere in this country. Maybe if you go to Scotland, like there are parts of remote Scotland and Wales, but in England, like you're always about 10 minutes away from a Tesco. So
a
grocery
What?
store.
Like a grocery store? Okay, cool. Yeah, got it. Yeah, but that's cool. Yeah. And you had like a digital detox day, it looked like, except for when you got onto Instagram and posted everything. So that's good. Getting out in nature is always good. Yeah, it was later. Okay, it was a later gram. Got it. That's awesome.
How are you? How are you?
I'm alhamdulillah. I'm here at the farm, and it's been raining for an entire week, which normally I would say sucks, but actually has been really nice after an extended stay in Saudi Arabia, almost 2 weeks, where I didn't see a single cloud. And so I got back and looked at the weather report, rain for a week, and even more rain coming today. So I'm kind of like, this is actually not bad. But I think I'm ready for it to stop raining, I think now. I had a good week of rain. So yeah, no, everything's great. We've got some feedback we can get to. This is from regular listener Bill, who's the man. Hello, brother Lucien from the Riyadh Metro Blue Line. As it happens, I ride this and I'm headed to a speaking gig at a conference at the Mandarin Oriental in Faisalia. Listening to your chat with Charles Halab, one of your best shows so far. Your and his description of the reality and promise of Saudi and the Saudi-U.S. relationship today is, in all aspects, one of the best I've heard. I'll be back in D.C. next week. Let's catch up. All the best, Bill. Bill, thank you very much for that. Hanaa and I both very much enjoyed that conversation with Charles. We loved the timing, especially of it, to sort of get his perspective and feedback, not just on the visit itself, but what happens next. So that was very nice of you, Bill. Hope your speaking gig went well. Bill is one of the best public speaking coaches in the world, spends a lot of time in Saudi Arabia. So I have no doubt that he nailed his public speaking engagement. This is from SteelBisht _ nice. He just says nice. I think he's talking about the interview, but nice. Mr. Charles says it's a rebirth, and that is the best word I've heard so far. This is a relationship that has always been there with ups and downs. I was at the forum in Riyadh. I've spent a lot of time in the USA, so I understand if people on the other side of the spectrum are worried this is political. For me, and I think others, it didn't feel political. We want good relations with America, and because many of us spent so much time there, and the excitement would have been the exact same if a Democratic president came and embraced us as brothers in the same way. Thank you for the show. No, thank you, Steelbisht, for that comment and the feedback. Appreciate that. And then this one is from Mike, my boy Mike, on WhatsApp. I would love to hear a segment about what you don't like about Saudi. Like, I know that people only say bad S about Saudi in the media, but surely you and Hannah have things that you don't like. Okay, thanks, Mike. Let's play golf like next week. But
what's one thing you don't like about Saudi, Lucien?
Well, actually, there are many things I don't like about Saudi. It's not like so many things that I don't like Saudi. Of course, I love Saudi, but there's things I don't like about every place. I could be very critical. I'm an inward critic, though. Like when I'm critical, I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, but then usually keep it in. I mean, and I think this is a great question because this is not like a pro-Saudi show. We're not like purposefully being like, hey, like, it's all like positive. It isn't all positive, and actually, we are not all positive. We regularly do deep dives of reports that highlight areas where Saudi Arabia needs work. I mean, there are little quips that we make that maybe highlight some of the things that aren't great about Saudi Arabia. Maybe but I love Saudi Arabia, and the whole point is that there's a wide open opportunity for a podcast such as this one to talk about the things that are not being talked about in the Western media, especially, or just in general are not talked about enough and we think deserve extra attention. Those things are not always overwhelmingly positive, but there is a lot of positive going on in Saudi Arabia right now. I mean, with the vision, with it changing, I think it would be a lot more easy to be critical, of Saudi Arabia in 2015 and 2014. And I've told stories about that before, but I could make a list. I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to think about it. There are things that I think Saudi Arabia maybe needs to improve. I mean, the list of things that I think the United States needs to improve about itself is way longer. That's the way things are in life. But anyway, thanks, Mike. And you know what? We'll talk about it at some point.
I appreciate the comment as well. I do think that there's plenty that people could pinpoint and suggest needs improvement within Saudi Arabia. And the same can be said of almost everywhere. Like you said, like maybe this isn't a quote, as you would say, pro-Saudi podcast, but it's definitely not an anti-Saudi podcast either. I think the point is we both really like Saudi Arabia, and therefore we're really excited to talk about some of the cool things that are happening there, regardless of some of the things that we don't like. And I think that, there's a really easy laundry list of things that people don't like about Saudi Arabia, namely like how hot it is, how humid it can be in the
100%.
coast,
Yeah.
how dusty it might be sometimes. Also, like, just little things here and there about just whatever, like what's available in the shops and, the type of kind of food and food waste. And there's little things that I've talked about quite a bit, but I think that there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think that the exciting thing about Saudi Arabia is the pace of change and how these things that maybe I don't like or you don't like or other people are, very critical of are in the process of evolving and changing. And that's a really kind of cool thing to be able to watch. And that's why I'm excited about talking about the change in Saudi Arabia. So yeah, absolutely. It was easier to be critical in 2015. And a lot of people are putting on their 2015 goggles when they're thinking about Saudi Arabia. And I think that we need to take those off and like re-examine what's happening and how a lot of the things that we didn't like are now moving into a space where we're trying to figure out how to make them better and how to improve the overall outcome for everybody. And I think that's exciting.
I kind of want to make a list because there are like really small things that I'm kind of like, what's up with this? Like, for example, I cannot, and I've texted you about this, I cannot buy Visine in Saudi Arabia. I don't know why that is. They don't
See,
sell it.
products not
And
available in shops.
products not available in shops, right? And then I tried to buy like the Roto, which is like the one that's a circle. It really works. I mean, because my eyes get so dry there, and then people are like, "You look tired." I'm like, "I'm not tired. I don't know, but I know I look like I'm literally a zombie right now." But it's little things like that. I actually want to do this, and maybe we can do it on a different segment. But this is a great question because I think it helps us bring up a point about what we're doing with the show. And I think we need, as you said, take off the 2025 dated
2015.
2015 dated sort
Yeah.
of glasses and put on some 2025, futuristic VR headset or whatever it is. I mean, and look at
Exactly.
Saudi Arabia as it is now because, that's what we're doing. And we're doing it, I think, very candidly. But we're a little biased describing that. But anyway, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Steel Bisht and Bill, for the feedback. Let's get to our conversation now. We've got a great one with Rasha Alkhamis. I think this is going to be a good one. And let's get to it. Joining us now on the 2030, Rasha Alkhamis. Rasha is president of the Saudi Mixed Martial Arts Federation, a appointment she just received recently. Mabruk, Rasha. She's also an advisor to the board of the International Boxing Association and on the board of directors of the Asian Boxing Federation. In 2018, Rasha became the first Saudi woman certified as a boxing coach by the Saudi Arabian Boxing Federation. She is a product of King Saud University and holds a master's from USC. Rasha, welcome to the 2030. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hosting me on the 2030.
I think first, congratulations are in order. Rasha was just appointed as the chairman of the board of the Saudi Mixed Martial Arts Federation for this current Olympic cycle. Congrats, Rasha.
Congrats.
Thank you, Hannah.
So there are some major sports events set to take place in the kingdom in the next couple of years. The FIFA World Cup, the Asian Winter Games, just to state two massive ones. And Saudi Arabia's sports sector market the value is projected to hit $22.4 billion by 2030, up from $8 billion. So this is driven by a surge in investments, a growing focus on the industry, and we have so much to learn from you about the world of sports in Saudi Arabia generally, and combat sports more specifically. Before we get into that, though, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you, Rasha. So if you could tell us a bit about how you got into martial arts. Did this start when you were living in the U.S.? Is this something that was a childhood passion? And tell us a little bit about that passion and how that's shaped kind of your life and your career.
So let me start by shedding light on my upbringing. I grew up with the principles and values that sports is for all. Sports is for girls and boys, men and women. These principles and values were instilled in me since I was 7 years old. I recall my mom used to encourage me and my eldest brother, Abdullah, right after our schoolwork to go and play basketball. And then during the weekend, me and my eldest brother, Abdullah, we would play versus my dad. My dad used to coach us, give us the critiques on how to improve our drills, how to improve our shots, etc. And the same critiques and techniques on how to improve Abdullah's game, my dad used to give it to me. I've started basketball as my first sport. I co-founded one of the women's soccer teams in Saudi Arabia back in 2007. I played tennis, long distance running, and then when I moved to the States to pursue my graduate studies in 2013, I've also had the opportunity to do different sports, cycling, running, hiking, and one of them was actually boxing. I picked up boxing back in 2013. And the reason why I actually picked up boxing is that I was going through a lot of pressures in life. One, living abroad. Two, starting my graduate schools at USC the first semester. The reason why I actually traveled to the States is that I wanted to, one, grow at a personal level, indulge different cultures, and meet different people. And I felt like my first semester, I was pretty much swamped with my studies. And I felt like at some point, there were like some gloomy days. And I needed that thing that could really impact me. I picked up boxing during my second semester and I felt the impact right away. The impact was very tangible on me. I started doing better at school. I'm part of like community school work, being part of the Senate at the International Public Policy program. So I've been more active ever since I started boxing. I did fitness boxing for the first couple of months, and then I switched to combat boxing. I competed 4 times in around 2 years back in California. And this is how I actually picked up boxing and the reason why I actually picked up boxing.
That's amazing. So Saudi Arabia is establishing sports federations across the kingdom. They're doing this really to drive interest, but also to prepare the next generation of athletes and youth in all kinds of sports. What are the roles of these federations, and how do they work to create interest in different sports? And then maybe specifically talk about MMA and that as a sort of budding sport in Saudi Arabia.
Sure, definitely. So currently Saudi Arabia has around 97 federations. 42 of them are Olympic sports, the other are non-Olympic sports. But let's have a zoom back and tell you, where do these federations sit? One is Ministry of Sports is the regulator for the sports industry. They are the custodian of the sports sector strategy. And then you would have the Olympic Committee, the Saudi Olympic Committee. And basically, the Saudi Olympic Committee, they are the executing arm of the Ministry of Sports. Under SOPC, the Saudi Arabia Olympic Committee, each federation do have their own mandate, their own strategy. However, if we talk about the role in general of the federation, they are the promoter and the regulator of the sport in the kingdom. And the reason of why do we have 97 federation is that it's important to create a community, increase the mass participation level, also creating a talent development, scouting for athletes, and then they would also focus on elite athletes, competitions at a regional, international level. The federation also makes sure that the governance of the sport itself is very much well structured. So if we're talking about referees and judges, if we're talking about coaches, the type of training, certification, the athletes, the growth of the athletes, etc. So basically, everything that I've mentioned mainly revolves around the role of the federation. If we take a zoom in, the MMA Federation is the regulator and the promoter of the mixed martial art sport in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Currently, we have 5 strategic directions. One is to increase the mass participation or the fitness MMA in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and make it one of the most practiced sport in Saudi. 2 is we also look at building the grassroots and the talent development, ensuring that there are multiple competitions for athletes who are interested to shift from fitness MMA to technique to competition. And then 3 is grooming the high elite athletes when it comes to more participation at a regional, international level, more training camps. 4 is we look at partnerships and sponsorships. We would love to be fully independent, fully, let's say, self-reliant when it comes to funds and looking at commercialization, sponsorships and partnerships with the private sector and semi-government and government entities. It's good to rely on government funds, but it's also very important to have our full autonomy and learn how to grow. And then last but not least is the governance. It's the governance of the federation internally and externally within the sports ecosystem.
So just for our viewers and listeners, can you list the different combat sports or the mixed martial arts, which ones you're talking about?
Definitely. So if we talk about mixed martial art is a sport that was founded back in 1990 in Japan. And it's actually a mix of different sports in one sport. We're talking about boxing, kickboxing, judo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, sambo. All these sports are all in one sport. And that's the sport that I'm talking about. In Saudi, we have around 13 combat sports, if not more. But the ones that I recall is boxing, kickboxing, judo, jiu-jitsu, karate. It's definitely 13 plus the number of combat sports. But mixed martial art, specifically it's a new sport. And it has also recently been founded here in Saudi Arabia back in 2018. There were 4 federations under one umbrella. the kickboxing, the Muay Thai, Sambo, and MMA. And then in 2021, all these four federations became a standalone federation. So it's a newly introduced sport in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And however, if we look at globally and the trend and what is happening globally when it comes to MMA, whether from an amateur level or a pro UFC, PFL, Bellator, etc., you would see viewership is really high. There's a lot of action happening in one round. So I think viewership, the analysis behind it, which makes it one of the top viewership sports globally. However, in Saudi, where the plan is to actually pick up that trend and introduce it to the younger generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, because it is the only sport that would make sure that your son or daughter do have all the self-defense techniques. It's a very well-rounded sport. Also, when it comes to competition, if they want to compete, there are no punches on the face. It's not as harmful as boxing or kickboxing or the other sports. And that's when we look at it from a junior and a youth level.
So I didn't know it was its own sport. I thought that you were bringing together all of the different individual ones. This is actually, I learned something new. But I love that you brought UFC into this, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit later. Before that, and you have touched on this because you did talk about the federations. There's 97 of them, and they're looking at developing a sense of community and really galvanizing people to experience these new sports, which is obviously part of the vision. Tell us how you think that the vision is driving the sports industry forward and how your work really helps achieve some of those objectives.
So I think if we look at the vision, one of those pillars do actually have sports elements into it. And then if we look at the Vision Realization Program, the VRP Quality of Life, also it is one of the most important VRP programs in the kingdom that focuses on sports, culture, entertainment, and tourism. The sports sector in general, Saudi has been growing at different levels. One, at hosting big events in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and then building that pipeline from 2025 until 2034. What do we have in the pipeline? So last year we had the World Combat Games. This year we're having the World Islamic Games. And then 2027, the Asian Football Games. And then 2029, we have also the Winter Asian Games in Neom. 2034, we have the Asian Games and World Cup. So that's like when it comes to the pipeline of events. And then if we look at another lens, it's basically the infrastructure. Almost every giga project is actually building their own stadium, preparing for the World Cup 2034. But these stadiums are not only stadiums, these are actually sports cities. They're hosting multiple arenas around this big stadium, arenas that would also be the home for different sports, the 97 Federation. And then if we look at the Olympic Committee and their role and what they've been doing for the past 4 years, they've developed a lot of enablers that helps the federation to actually flourish. So when they have Mahad Academy, that it's a high performance center for youth, it starts from 7 years old to 12 years old. The Saudi Olympic High Performance Center, it actually also oversees athletes, high performance athletes from year 15 until 30. The federation support system, which basically they make sure that the federation are actually growing, setting their own KPIs and hitting their own targets. Whenever they do that, they get a financial incentive. Another enabler is making sure that the 170 government clubs not only focuses on football, but also diversify their own portfolio of sports. There are around 20 sports, and for every medal they win, they get the financial incentive to the Olympic Committee across the federations. So the enablers are there, and it's just a matter of actually being smart on how to interact with these enablers, ensure that your sport is actually a priority sport, and how do you drive that?
So tons of investment into sports. According to Surge Sports Investments, a PIF company, the Kingdom has hosted over 100 international events, 40 different sports since 2019. You talked about these investments, and just a kind of general question, how is the sport growing now, like from your perspective, and how is what you're working on, like what's your game plan going forward? You've seen a lot of growth, and how do you double down on that?
Let's take boxing as an example. Before Vision 2030, we had 0 registered female boxers. And then after Vision 2030, there are around 240 female registered boxers. And that's just within 6 years. 460% growth. And if it tells you that the growth is there. If you look at number of growth registered athletes, there are around 300% growth in boxing, 18,000 registered in fitness boxing across fitness gyms. And then the aim now is to replicate whatever I've done in boxing to MMA and ensure that it's a triple-digit growth when it comes to women's MMA, when it comes to fitness MMA, when it comes to registration of clubs.
And I think you've touched on this a little bit, but clearly with all of this investment and the growth that we're seeing, Saudi Arabia is positioning itself as a very competitive position globally. But how do you assess the competitiveness specifically within MMA today? And where do you think the biggest opportunity is?
I think there are multiple areas to look at it when we would talk about competitiveness. One is to leverage the PFL and the signed contract between the Saudi MMA and PFL. There are around now 5 athletes that are competing in the PFL, such as Hattan Saif, Abdullah Dahtani, Abdulaziz bin Muammar, Mustafa Rashid. So there are multiple athletes, Malik Basahel. So these are athletes who demonstrated themselves within the amateur, and now they're competing in the PFL, which is the pro scene. And this contract, Saudi through the PIF has invested in PFL. So it's important to ensure that to groom the athletes at an amateur level, ensure that they're participating at a PFL level. 2 is, since MMA is still in discussions around being an accredited sport at the Olympic level. So I think that's also something that we're looking at. How do we ensure that MMA is an accredited Olympic sport? So these are mainly the areas that we're looking at it when it comes to competitiveness.
We've talked a little bit about the sort of big money, big investments now, but there's also a community dimension when it comes to sports, all sports really. Can you share your insights in the impact of community involvement and growing interest in sports, I think in general, and then in martial arts, I think more specifically?
Definitely. So I got certified back in 2017 as the first female certified boxing coach from King Saud University, from the Saudi Boxing Federation. And I've trained around 500 women in King Saud University, 500 women in Princess Noura University. And there were plenty of women who actually wanted to do it, but because the classes were full, so we couldn't take, the intake was limited, but there were thousands of women who actually wanted to do the sport. In general, combat sports has been growing in Saudi, and it is no longer perceived as a bloody sport, an aggressive sport, or a sport that is unlifting. These misconceptions belong to the past, and they no longer exist here in Saudi Arabia or across the world. More women are actually really interested in combat sports, specifically MMA, and I've been seeing that a lot. I think it's just a matter of actually opening the doors for these women, and they will follow through with their passion and interest. And it's like many things and many sectors, whether it's sports, culture, music, entertainment. And we've been seeing that growing here in Saudi Arabia. And I truly believe that these women should not be actually stopped. They should actually be supported, and they are being supported here in Saudi. the sport has been growing, and it is just a matter of actually giving them the venues and the avenues to pursue their passion.
You jumped ahead to the question I was just about to ask, specifically thinking about a question maybe we haven't asked yet, which is, you're the first woman to serve as vice president of the Saudi Arabian Boxing Federation. Later, you were appointed as president of the Arab Women's Boxing Committee. You're a woman holding a pretty big position today for a sector that only very recently opened up to women in a sports category that is typically associated with men. So what is that, Rasha? What challenges do you face in these leadership roles, and how are you navigating them?
This is a very good question. From my end, I truly believe that I've never looked at it from a man or a woman or a girl or a boy perspective. I've always looked at it from results. So I'm a result-oriented person. I look at results. I look at achievements. I look at numbers. And whenever, especially either here in Saudi or across the world, whenever you provide and whenever you work hard, you will achieve those results. And your results will speak about your work. So I think for me, I've always looked at it from how do I become more a result-oriented person? How do I look at how can I become a result-oriented leader? How do we put my ego on? How do we put our egos on the side, and how do we really focus on getting the results regardless? We might actually face some differences across different fields in life and across different spectrum in life. But I think as long as you communicate your objectives, your goals, and where do you actually want to head, people will support you, because if you show them that your objective is part of their objectives and their bigger goal, they will support you and they'll ensure that you're being supported. So we need to start shifting away from and start shifting the narrative from women empowerment towards society empowerment. How do we really empower the society? Whether it's men, women, children, elderly, people with disabilities, how do we empower them? How do we empower society? How do we become a more high-performance driven country? How do we look at results? How do we really achieve results? And how do we ensure that these results are actually impactful and sustainable for the longer term? And it's not just an instant result. So we're building, we're structuring, we ensure that there is a pathway not only for the current generation, but also for the future generations to follow through.
I want to ask you, and I'm sorry to pivot so quickly, but there's so much going on in sort of international media about UFC in Saudi Arabia. Of course, you have Turki Al-Sheikh, who's really enjoys it and is passionate about the sport. There have been a number of really big sort of fights that have happened in Saudi Arabia. Are you seeing UFC? I mean, and just as a little anecdote, I stayed in the same hotel where both boxing sides were staying pretty recently in Saudi Arabia. So it was like me in the hotel, like Mr. Khawaja, and then it was like two like sides of boxers and all the people they had around them. Are you seeing that translate to not just more knowledge about Saudi Arabia from the outside in, but are you seeing the sport pick up in Saudi Arabia amongst the youth because of these major events and all this publicity?
That's a very good question. Ever since Saudi hosted the first heavyweight championship back in 2019, Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz, boxing grew by 300%. And number of clubs grew from 8 to 84 clubs. Fitness boxing grew by 18,000. And then number of referees and judges grew by 70, from around 7 referees and judges to 70. So these big fights, many would look at it as if it's trying to change the perception about Saudi, but it's really for Saudi and it's really for the people in Saudi. The impact on the ecosystem is really growing, and the demand on the sport has been really growing. If I would look at it, I would say that these fights are really inspiring future generations to pick up the sport. You never know, one day we'll have a Saudi heavyweight champion who is competing at the highest levels, and then we would say this is the results. But not only that, like even at an amateur level. I remember one of my friends, she has been trying to convince her younger son for the past 4 years to really pick up boxing, pursue self-defense, etc. And he was not really into it. And one day she took him to Rage on the Red Sea, the Usyk versus Joshua fight in Jeddah. And he really got inspired by the whole thing. And he told his mom, cancel every extracurricular activity. I want to be a boxer. And he literally, ever since he went to that fight, really got into it. And and now he's competing at a national level. So if this tells you that this is just a simple story of a friend of mine who her son got into boxing. How about the different people that we don't know about? So it's really inspiring many to love the sport, to pick up the sport, to practice it, and then become a true athlete.
That is an incredibly important answer because it is something that we deal with a lot when we're talking to people about Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of skepticism about these big events. And I think that the numbers that you mentioned are really important in terms of the growth in this sport. And this is just one federation out of the 97. And this is obviously these investments are translating to on the ground progress and inspiration for young people within the kingdom. And I love that you can tell one anecdote, but then have the numbers to really back that this is happening at a large scale. I think the last question really is, I wonder what you think is next for the mixed martial arts space within the kingdom, the sports sector in general, and maybe what new records you are going to break, Rasha, as a Guinness World Book record holder.
And then when it comes to Saudi MMA, first of all, I'm honored by the trust of the president of the Saudi Olympic Committee, Prince Abdulaziz bin Tibki Faisal, and the Vice President, Prince Fahad bin Chloui, for their trust and support in me. This is definitely a great opportunity, and also it is a responsibility that I'll put all my energy and all my time into it, ensure that the Saudi MMA within the cycle 2024 to 2028 will reach to new heights when it comes to increasing the mass participation, when it comes to number of athletes, when it comes to really being in the middle of that podium and seeing our country flag at the highest, biggest events around the world. So I think this is definitely a big responsibility that when I take full pride in it, and then I'm very determined to really achieve results. If we look at the sports sector in general, I'm very optimistic. I fully believe that we are living in the golden era of sports in Saudi Arabia at different levels. One, at hosting big events. Two, at building those big infrastructures across different mega projects. Three, investing at the athlete level and building those systems, building the federations, providing all the enablers. So, and not only that, His Majesty King Salman bin Abdulaziz and the Crown Prince has really invested a lot during this era with the leadership of Prince Abdulaziz. I truly believe that the sky is the limit, and we've achieved a lot within 70 years, and I'm expecting that more results will be shown in the next coming years.
What you didn't tell us about your records.
Yeah, we're going to have to hear the record. Yeah, we got to hear that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the record that you have broken and then what you'd like to do next?
Sure, definitely. I think hopefully next is to break a record in Saudi MMA. That's definitely like break either the most registered number of athletes or the most, and let's see how we're going to find a way. But like when it comes to my records, mainly they were all involved in football. I got my first Guinness World Record was in 2017. I was part of 27. There were 30 women from 20 countries. There were either former or current football players, and they were either current or former football players. And then we were under a not-for-profit organization called Equal Playing Field. We played the highest soccer match in history at an elevation of 5,700. And that's That's the first Guinness World Record. The second one is the lowest soccer match in history, and we've played that as well. 30 women from 20 countries under a not-for-profit organization called Equal Playing Field. The third one was the most diverse. The fourth one is the longest in terms of hours.
It would be awesome to get one Guinness Book of World Records. I'm not going to do it.
Oh.
But so that's quite amazing. Rasha
Very
Alkhamis,
exciting.
president of the Saudi Mixed Martial Arts Federation. A tremendous pleasure. Thank you for joining us on the 2030. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Let's get to the news.
Let's get to the news. Thanks to Rasha. That was great. Okay, we are starting off with some all-important news on the Saudi economy, which, as many know, is seeking to intelligently manage fluctuations in the price of oil as it continues full throttle into Vision 2030's diversification plans. Here on the back nine of the transformation, Saudi Finance Minister Mohammed Al-Jadaan said the kingdom would, quote, take stock, end quote, of its spending priorities in response to a significant decline in oil revenue. This is according to an FT report out yesterday. Riyadh plans to maintain its current pace of government spending despite facing widening budget and current account deficits, as well as rising debt levels, the minister told the FT. I mean, I'm going to interject here. That's sort of, we've talked about this on the show. Why wouldn't it do that? It's part of the vision, right? You're investing in diversification. So, you know, the whole point is that this doesn't matter in the future. A finance ministry spokesperson confirmed the comments to Reuters, adding, as long as the return on investment from additional expenditure is greater than the cost of the debt, then the kingdom will continue spending while maintaining the sustainability and health of public finance. If it means short-term deficits or short-term rises in debt to GDP ratios, that is something we can accommodate and will. Our fiscal position remains very strong and shall remain so. Jadaan told the newspaper that he would not be concerned about the deficit widening to 3, 4, or occasionally 5% of GDP as long as government spending supported non-oil growth. Non-oil economic growth is the kingdom's North Star, he said, and maintaining current spending levels aims to transform the economy in the long term over several decades. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, the comments really reflect one thing, which is there's a determination to stick to the plan. And I think that, you know, just because there's going to be fluctuations, which obviously there will be variations in oil prices, when dealing with investments, there's going to be a risk, and you just need to stick with the plan because it makes sense. And those fluctuations are something that you're going to have to ride out when times are tough. I think, you know, you're going to see returns. There are returns that have already been realized. There's so much growth happening in the non-oil economy. And it just means that we need to be resilient and stick the course. So I think it's a good thing, even if it can be misinterpreted as something negative, which people
I think
love
you're
to do.
seeing the same comments from Amin Nasser from Aramco, basically saying like, hey, this is the time to spend. We're spending now because we need to diversify. I mean, Aramco's like obviously the proceeds from Aramco go to finance Vision 2030 and all the reforms going on, but they also are a private company that's public, or a public company that's publicly traded, and they also are its own kind of company. So they're doing the same thing. They're investing in VC. They're getting into new areas of growth for Aramco that requires money, like investment. So they're doing bonds, they're issuing debt because that's what they want to do. And that's how they see getting across the river, essentially. You also have Saudi Arabia investing heavily into refineries, and those investments, like over time, give it flexibility on the oil markets. I mean, the more that Saudi Arabia can refine locally, it gives it some control over exports. So, I mean, instead of directly selling crude oil to other refiners, it can refine itself and sell the products there. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just good because it's like a reminder. Hey, like, you know, we're in the investment period here. Then there will be a returns period. So just everybody calm down. There's pressure, and I'm not sure where the pressure is coming from. The article like noted pressure on the government. I mean, like, sure, like look at the U.S., right? I mean, it's a different story, apples and oranges, right? But the U.S. is just all debt. So it's okay to take on debt to finance what you want to have in the future. Anyway, cool.
Yeah, responsible debt for sure.
Responsible
So
debt.
moving on. There's news about Humane, which is Saudi Arabia's much anticipated AI company, backed and owned by the PAF. It's a new artificial intelligence platform, and it plans to launch a $10 billion venture fund. So according to Axios, the company is seeking investments, and the report says that Riyadh has emerged as the fastest growing market for data centers in the Middle East, which is very exciting. I think Humane has made some pretty big headlines since the announcement. And AI is just booming within the country.
$10 billion venture fund. That is, that's pretty big. And yeah, I mean, like, this is just, it's the latest in Saudi Arabia's like kind of patient over time, like interest in getting ahead on AI. It's actually a big race now between the Gulf, its neighbors, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, Qatar, all want to be ahead on AI. It's like it's a unanimous sort of like desire for Gulf states, especially wealthy Gulf states, to get ahead of this thing. They sort of see AI as the new oil. Talal Al-Jabri, who's hopefully going to join the show, who just launched an AI fund in Saudi Arabia, said that in a Bloomberg article. I think I sent it to you yesterday, Hannah. But that this is a diversification thing for them. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, very
10
cool.
billion, though. I mean, it's a huge VC
That's
fund.
a lot of money.
We have some good news for our Hijazi brothers and sisters out there. King Abdulaziz International Airport, Jeddah's main airport, has secured third place, bronze medal in the 2024 Airport Connectivity Index for the Middle East, number 3 in the region, which is really cool. It's actually, that means something. There's a lot of great airports in the region. The ranking was announced at the Air Connectivity Conference 2025, held in Shanghai, which I missed this year. But the Airports Council International Asia Pacific and Middle East unveiled its annual index. It is a kind of leading index. KAIA followed Dubai and Qatar's Hamad International Airport in the regional rankings. Both of those are exceptional airports as well. Again, okay, before you say anything about like third place or whatever, you got to really understand where Jeddah and KAIA came from. It was maybe my least favorite airport in the entire world before they completely redid it. And that is not just my opinion. That was like global opinion. It actually ranked as the worst airport in the world in one ranking. And actually, so this news story is from Arab News, who reported it. So I was like, I remember this airport, like not just me being completely miserable in the airport, but like having like this be like widely known from like 2015, 2016. And so I Googled it. Same publication, Arab News, had an article being like, Jeddah's airport is the worst. And it was kind of interesting to read. It was very candid about like how far the airport had to come and what it needed to do. Didn't pull any punches. So to be literally ranked as the worst airport in the world to top 3 in the Middle East, which is known for a place where there is an aviation arms race, you could say, where people, they want to be the pivot between East and West. Quite an accomplishment. Mabruk to the Jeddawis and their new airport, which is actually awesome. I really like it.
Yeah, congratulations. I think the Jeddah airport, I mean, here you go, Mike. That's something for Mike, right? Like that's something people didn't like, the Jeddah airport. But look, we're working hard to make sure that we turn these things around. So Mazen Johak, the CEO of the Jeddah Airports Company, said that the latest ranking really reflects progress in expanding the air network and enhancing connectivity. To be fair, there are more international flights in and out of Jeddah than there are out of Dammam. There are very few out of Dammam. So they're obviously higher in demand. And I would also like to suggest a complete total renovation into a brand new airport in recent years has also helped. So it's not just that connectivity, but the airport itself is great. It's held the 3rd spot in 2023 So it's actually, it's maintaining this ranking. And in 2024, it served 49.1 million passengers, so up 14% from 2023, which makes it the highest annual passenger volume recorded by any airport in the kingdom. The busiest day was December 31st, where over 174,600 passengers passed through the airport. That was also in December, also set a monthly record with traffic exceeding 4.7 million passengers. That is a lot of traffic. Sorry, I believe that was not even during like Ramadan or Eid. No, December 31st. So it's just, even those seasons, which are supposed to be the busiest, weren't as busy as December 31st.
I
Congrats
have
to Jeddah.
one. Yeah, congrats. I have one. This is the only flight I've ever missed, and it was like a year ago in the new airport. And I showed up like plenty of time at like before the flight, and they were just like, "Sorry, you can't make it there in time." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like it's like in 80 minutes. I'm a performance machine. Okay, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Watch this." And they're like, "Sorry, we can't give you a ticket for that. Here's a ticket for the next one." And I was like, "Okay." Kind of didn't care. And I got there, got a new ticket, went through the line. I was there, and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna start boarding the flight that I was supposed to be on." And I was like, "Oh." So, I was like, what's up with that? But anyway, maybe
I think
whatever.
security checks and stuff, and
Yeah, but
that's
I mean,
probably
yeah.
no.
It's gonna walk right through
All
there. Like, hey,
right.
everybody.
No, that's the thing. Some people think they can just like do that, but really there are rules in place for a reason.
Well, I did it, but
Anyway,
it's
I
okay.
think we
Anyway,
should conclude by talking about something that everybody seems to be talking about. So it is that series of reports that emerged over recent days about legalizing alcohol in Saudi Arabia and having it be available in certain parts of the kingdom in 2026. So I think we need to break that down a little bit and talk about it. So it started with a report from a wine-focused blog, which suggested that Saudi Arabia was planning to lift its 73-year-old ban, like that was their phrasing. And it claimed that the kingdom intended to permit alcohol sales, but only in designated tourist zones, including luxury hotels and resorts, as part of preparations for hosting the World Cup in 2034. Sorry. It got picked up very quickly by a number of global outlets. It was sent to me by so many different people. And of course, as you may have guessed, we talked about it. Lucien and I were like, I was sent it by a few people. Lucien got it sent to him, and I was like, fake news. Even if it happens, it's fake news. These articles are not necessarily, there were no quotes in them. There were no dates. There were no people, no officials. Nothing local was even cited in any of them. But the original article was very, very light on all of that. So I was very skeptical, and that didn't stop sources around the world from picking it up and getting really excited about it. But then earlier this week, Reuters, which is a real news source, reported that a Saudi official denied those media reports and saying that the kingdom would not allow alcohol. So Reuters, which can be trusted, did not name a source, nor did it say the spokesperson nor did it say that spokesperson spoke on conditions of anonymity. So here we are. That's, that we just wanted to make sure that people know that we have our finger on the pulse. This was something that was circulated quite widely. I don't know. I think fake news, at least fake reporting or at least unfounded reporting. But I don't know. What do you think, Lucien?
I think definitely unfounded reporting. I mean, like maybe they saw something, this wine blog, which is kind of amazing that in 2025, a wine blog can put something out there and then it's like, oh, with no sourcing. And then it's like in The Sun and MSN and it's like going all around. And then major sort of mainstream outlets picked it up, but they were like, this is kind of weak reporting. Like we're reporting that everyone's reporting it, but that it's not really doesn't seem to be a thing. I mean, in journalism, it's like, what's your source? Like, can we verify it? Of course, no serious news outlet could do that. I think also like, I'm not quite like prepared to say that it's totally fake news. It seems to be something that might be coming in Saudi Arabia. It's really hard to know. People do ask me and I'm like, well, it seems like really nice new restaurants that open up always have a classic looking bar in it and then there's no alcohol. So like, I don't know, maybe they're betting that it might, I have no idea, but I'm really not sure what's going on here. I think the Reuters piece, I mean, Reuters is top notch, but like to not cite the ministry that the official is from, to give no details on that at all, to even say, not even, because usually the Reuters would say the official said but denied to be acknowledged. Like that's enough information to say an official came out but said I don't want to be the face of the denial. I thought that was a little strange. I don't really like. Okay, so here's one from Mike. Mike might say, hey, like, don't you dislike that Saudi doesn't have alcohol? Actually, I don't. These days, I'm like, I kind of think that it's, I don't mind it at all. Like, I really don't. It's kind of nice. You take it out of the picture and it's just not there, and it's okay. I mean, fine. But I think, so, and it's also not really my place, right? I mean, I live there for part of the year. I visit almost every month, but it's like, it's not, I am not a Saudi citizen. So I think that my opinion on this is an American's opinion on Saudi Arabia. We have touched on that in the beginning of the show. I think Saudis need to do what's best for Saudi Arabia. Will it make tourism? Will it help grow tourism? Absolutely. And I can tell you for a fact, people won't go unless there's alcohol. You can blame them for that, and you should, but they won't do it. If they want to go on vacation and they want to sit on a beach, some people want a daiquiri, and I don't blame them, but I'm also, I mean, that's just a fact. I think it'll be easier to hire foreign talent that may like to have a snifter of port around Christmas, or whatever it is when they're over there. And if they can't do it, they may say, what, rather be in Dubai. But I mean, those are things that like are observations. I think Saudi is doing things at its own pace. Alcohol has a lot of drawbacks for society, a lot. Health, safety, cultural issues. I mean, like, I can't imagine what Saudi roads may be like if there isn't really good enforcement on drunk driving. So yeah, it's got its drawbacks. I think they're taking their time with this thing. And honestly, I don't know if the story is true. It could be true, and this was a very kind of Saudi denial where like, tamp it down for now, but the word's been put out there, and then it'll sort of roll out slowly. It'll be a smaller announcement, whatever. I have no idea, but it's interesting that in 2025, we still have this situation where people are like, hey, like this very unverified, unpopular, wine vlog is reporting something, and people just pick it up like wildfire. I don't know. It's
like
crazy.
people have been waiting for it. I think, the other day, actually, I was in the car listening to the 2030 with my kids, and we were talking about how, like, we were kind of talking about what Mike was talking about. There are so many things that people just forget to mention about Saudi Arabia and how important, like, some of these changes are, and how we have to be realistic about the change and where the positive changes and where there are still challenges and where there's work that still needs to be done. And my son was like, yeah, but it's really important to remember that, like, the government of Saudi Arabia is looking out for the citizens of Saudi Arabia. So you don't want the government to go do something that's going to appease like the rest of the world, that's going to harm and upset people inside Saudi Arabia. And they just don't, that's not how they operate. I have a really clever son. But I think that's a really important note. You're an American, that's your perspective. And yes, there are a lot of things, everything that you said is true. However, it's not necessarily true for people that live in Saudi Arabia and the citizens of Saudi Arabia, and a lot of the people that choose to go to Saudi Arabia do that because there isn't alcohol available to buy in shops. I mean, I was in the US with a very conservative Saudi Muslim woman that hadn't traveled out of Saudi Arabia in her whole life. And she wouldn't even go into a convenience store because she was disturbed by the amount of alcohol that was being sold. Like, people just don't see it, don't want to. A lot of people don't, right? So I think that, who knows? Obviously, we don't know. And maybe it'll be in places where people choose not to go, or you have a choice to see it or not to see it. But I think that you're right. It's interesting that this was something that the media took and run with. But, like, obviously, watch this space.
Yeah, I guess watch this space. I don't know what's coming next, but those are all great points. Dr. Hanaa, thank you so much. See you next time.
See you next time.